Sponsored by Love Chevrolet, South Carolina's #1 volume Chevy dealer. Don't let the summer of savings pass you by. I-26 at Harbison and at lovechevy.com. Together, let's drive.
All right, Mike Morgan joining us. Morgan on the move, getting ready for the start of the football season. All right, is it Columbia or Carolina discount appliances?
I like to say both because they're based in Columbia, but they serve Carolina. So
Okay.
Here's the deal. It's good that you read it both ways because
Okay.
I don't want your vast audience outside the Midlands to think, well, shoot, everybody in Columbia gets to save $300-400 on an appliance while we have to pay the typical store brand price. No. Sherry won't stand for that.
Mm-hmm.
She'll make sure wherever you are in South Carolina, you're going to save a bunch of money with that one simple what was that number again, Phil? I was a little hazy on that. 803.
Let me ask you, will Sherry actually take your call like right now? It says call now. So, like, will she take it now at night? She's still, like, 24/7 on this thing?
You know, Sherry's a real go-getter. I wouldn't put it past her, but I know one thing. If for some reason she's out of the office right now, you know what she'll do? She'll call you back. There's this thing called voicemail, and it's making tremendous strides as technology. Very, very underrated feature. Now, I know you don't answer your phone or typically call people back in a timely manner, but for Sherry, she takes pride in doing just that.
That voicemail thing, is that little thing on your phone? If you push the number 1, it rings your voicemail. Is that what that is?
Yeah, well, most of us don't have to push number 1 anymore. we see a little icon and we hit a little thing that looks like a mailbox.
Oh.
You, on the other hand,
I push number
you probably
1.
have like the dual cassette answering machine back at the house, and you tell people to wait for the beep, and then the cassettes start moving, and then then you come home and you like rewind the cassette tape and listen to your messages. Beautiful thing. If 1982 ever comes back, Phil, you are going to be right there with the times.
I had one of those, but unfortunately, the plug caught the shag carpet on fire, and it burned the house down. It burned the whole thing down, so I don't have it anymore. Okay, call Sherry at 803-770-3008. Okay.
Boom.
I want to ask you, of course, you're based in Atlanta, so you hear Georgia Tech stuff. What's the reaction to what Georgia Tech is doing over there? You saw the story, I'm sure, about Josh Petty and this big payout, and that's like Georgia Tech? Georgia Tech?
Yeah. What's
the reaction in the city?
Well, I can tell you, as someone who dabbles in some sports talk radio on a station in Atlanta, 680 The Fan. You know, we've got Georgia Tech fans in that building. Georgia Tech fans are a lot like Miami fans. They're fans, but hardly any of them actually have a degree from that particular school. The ones that do have a degree from Georgia Tech are incredibly smart and very successful, but very few of them are still in Atlanta. That's part of the problem. You know, you wonder why Georgia Tech doesn't get more than, say, 40,000 fans. That's on a good night for a game. Their alums are just they're all over. They're taking engineering jobs in California, New York. So it's always been kind of a unique challenge on two fronts. You have an alumni base that's scattered, and you have what I kept hearing for years and years, because I would talk about this. Why is Georgia Tech not better in college football? And they would always point to the math requirements for college kids. And I don't know if they relax those requirements or not, but it seems to me like more and more kids are getting in. And then the other thing is well, okay, where's the NIL money going to come from? I don't know who their sugar daddy is, and I use that term affectionately. But somebody, you mentioned the one 5-star. I believe they just inked another, I don't know if he's a 5-star, but a pretty big-time recruit that I'm sure is commanding NIL dollars. So they're trying to make a statement. We are no longer content with being in the abyss, which is where Georgia Tech has been. I mean, they really haven't been relevant in college football in a while. They're trying to put their best foot forward, and I give them credit for doing it.
So I mentioned earlier tonight, going over Jerry Palm's projections, his bowl projections. There are all kind of projections out there. I saw ESPN's power rating projection had the Gamecocks with a 500 record. Jerry Palm has Clemson not making the playoffs, going to the bowl game in Charlotte, and the Gamecocks not making a bowl game at all. So this is not to attack Jerry Palm. That's not my point here. He's like anybody else in the media, the national media. He can throw his projections out there, and you can accept or reject. But just the idea that a national media person would look at Clemson and say, no playoff for you, and look at South Carolina and say, no bowl game for you, that's a little bit of a cold slap in the face to the fans here in the state, I would say.
To the ones who actually know who Jerry Palm is, I mean, I know Jerry just because years and years ago, I'd have him on my show to talk about March Madness, to talk about, he was one of the first computer guys. Mm-hmm. He was one of the first people to type in data and come out with who he thought was. He was kind of Joe Lunardi before Joe Lunardi in a lot of ways. And he's a very nuts and bolts analytical type of guy, like a lot of these guys are. If you looked at Vegas odds, you would know this better than me. I think Carolina's over/under, I want to say, is 5.5.
Correct.
Okay, and Clemson, if we actually had a Vegas line on whether or not they make the playoff, my guess is the odds would be less than 50-50.
I've seen over and under on Clemson at around 10 in terms of their wins. Would you put them 10-2, which would be right there on that border of making the playoffs, unless they won the ACC with 2 losses?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think if they go 10-2, you're almost assuming that they lose to Florida State, mm-hmm. And they're not the ACC champion. And the question becomes, does a 2-loss ACC team get in a 12-team playoff? And I would think that would be challenging. I think that would be difficult. Now, like anything else, it depends on where the 2 losses are, where the 10, what 10 wins. If they beat Georgia in week 1, then they've got some margin of error because you just beat the number 1 team in the country.
Yeah.
But if you don't, if you go out there, and I think they're about a 2-touchdown underdog, and then you lose to NC State for the 3rd time in 4 years. I believe that number's correct. You can fact check me on that. If those things happen, it's going to be really hard to get in. I just keep thinking to myself, the ACC comes down to Florida State, Clemson. I know Miami fans will say, "What about us?" NC State fans will say, "What about us?" And maybe there's another fan base out there, Louisville, for example, that thinks they're going to be in the hunt, and maybe all that's going to happen. I hope there's some unpredictability in college football this year, but I think it comes down to that game. You'll have to give me the date, but I think between the Noles and the Tigers.
Yeah, late September.
Mike Morgan on the move here tonight on Sports Talk. Mike wanted to shift gears a little bit up to the NFL because I found a couple of stories in the league extremely fascinating, beginning with the Dallas situation. Dallas earlier this week or late last week valued at now $10 billion. The Cowboys are most lucrative franchise in North America. If that's indeed the case, and Jerry Jones is no idiot with money, how he spends it might be another story. How come they can't get their deals done with CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott?
Well, I mean, we're still under a salary cap, right? And I don't think they have a ton of salary cap room. Mm-hmm. So it's not as if you can just write both those guys a blank check. Which you're right, it wouldn't affect how much gas he can put in his yacht. I mean, he still is going to be in pretty good shape. So. I really think, and I think too, we're in a time frame now where it's next man up for these free agency quarterbacks, and whoever is up winds up signing the biggest deal in the history of pro football, even though they haven't necessarily earned it. Dak still hasn't been to a Super Bowl. Dak still hasn't performed that well in the playoffs. I think Jerry is not 100% sold on Dak. If you want to be brutally honest about it, he'll never come out and say that. The thing is, it's not the money. It's that when you invest that into your quarterback, you're pretty much stuck with him. You can't do that and go, well, buyer's remorse. We want to get somebody else in here. You can't have a $55 million backup quarterback. It doesn't work that way. So I think there's a little bit of the CeeDee Lamb thing. I expect to get done. He is a major weapon.
They've got to have him, right?
Got to have him. Got to have him. But I think Jerry's sitting there going, look, show me something, Dak, in the postseason. Get us to the promised land. We've given you one of the most talented rosters in the NFL on both sides of the ball, and you haven't been able to lead us to a Super Bowl. I mean, Joe Burrow did it in his second year, and he hasn't had half the talent in Cincinnati that they've had in Dallas. So this is not a Pat Mahomes type of deal. This is I'm Dak Prescott, and I still have some things I need to prove if I want ownership to completely break the bank for a second time on another contract.
I guess my question is, would you let him walk, though? Because I just don't see, and I agree with you about everything you said about Prescott. He still hasn't proven himself in the playoffs. But, I mean, isn't the devil you know better off than the devil you don't? Because there are so few very, very talented elite quarterbacks in the NFL. Where would Dallas go if they do let Prescott walk? Excuse me.
Well, and that is why teams are doing what they're doing. That is why Tua just gets 50-some-odd million. That is why Jordan Love, who's played about 8 good football games in his life at the NFL level, signs for over $50 million, because the fear factor of not being able to get, forget about elite, even a good quarterback in the draft, because more often than not, these guys miss. And so you feel obligated to do it. And that's why a lot of people are like, Jerry, he's not perfect, and he hasn't been great in the postseason, but what's plan B? The truth is, the only plan B nowadays is in the draft, because you're not going to – it's not the NBA. You're not going to get a superstar quarterback in free agency. It doesn't work that way unless he's like, 30-something, 38 years old, like an Aaron Rodgers or somebody like that. So I think when it's all said and done, Jerry will give in like the other owners have, and they'll give Dak a big old pot of money. Mm-hmm. And Dallas fans will have to hope that Dak can actually get him to the next level.
Did we pull the curtain on the Braves season too soon? Do you think they're going to make the playoffs now as a wild card team? I don't think they catch the Phillies, but the way they've been playing of late, especially out in San Francisco, I mean, this looks like a playoff contender now, doesn't it?
Well, despite Phil's natural hatred for the number one team in the state of South Carolina, the Atlanta Braves.
Oh, that is such a lie.
You hate the Braves, you Yankee-loving son of a gun.
That part is true. I'm talking about favorite team in South Carolina. I mean, you cut a South Carolinian open, they're bleeding Yankees.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
The typical South Carolinian, if you stop them on the street and ask them, I want you to, next time, you make the rare visit into South Carolina, I want you to stop, let's say, stop in Woodruff and ask a native Woodruffian if they prefer the Yankees over the Braves and see what you get.
I talked to Bill in Honeypath last night and said, Bill, I want you to conduct a straw poll, Yankees or Braves in Honeypath. And he told me, Mike, it's not even close. It's Braves all the way, 112-0.
Well, they are the number 2 team in Honeypath, so you got to factor in BHP and the Bears up there as number 1.
That's right. No, I think I think you get 3 wild card spots. I still like the Braves' chances of grabbing one of them. Now, what they do when they get there this year, if that happens, I don't know if there's enough with all the injuries. And by the way, Sale struggling again today. Not Sale. Fried. Sale's the one guy who hasn't struggled. Fried struggling again today. That's a concern.
Let me update for you. It's a final.
Yes.
The San Francisco Giants defeat your Atlanta Braves 6-0.
Yeah. Again, Fried got hit, and Fried's been hit in all 3 starts since coming off the disabled list. That ain't good. You're already down Strider. You've had injuries up and down the line. Fried is kind of your de facto ace if you do make the postseason. That's your game 1 starter. I don't know if he's fatigued, he's had injuries. He's a very frail guy, kind of like you were one day, Phil Kornblut. He kind of wears down over the course of the season.
I never gave up 6 runs in a ball game.
You did not. You had 6 pizzas in one serving, but you never gave up 6 runs in an outing. So, they got to get him right. Atlanta fans are a little spoiled. They're also a little impatient. After winning that World Series, they haven't gotten past the first round in the postseason. They don't want to see another team that they've been emotionally invested in go in the first round and get bounced again. Yeah. So they got one eye on the regular season. They got one eye on the postseason.
Well, they better just focus on the regular season because the postseason for them is no guarantee. We got to run. We thank you, and we will talk to you next week.
Thanks, Mike.
Phil, you got it, guys. Get yourself a good deal on a dishwasher before the night's over. Sherry's standing by as we speak.
Give Sherry a call right now at 803-770-3008.
We should run the first part of that segment as their commercial. I'm not sure they get a better spot than the one you and Mike just did.
Probably not. And if you don't get Sherry,
hysterical.
Let me give you Mike's number. Let me number real quick. And if you don't get Sherry, you can call Mike.
Call Mike.
And he'll sell you his dishwasher. And he'll deliver his dishwasher to your door.
Or he'll call Sherry.
Okay. But try Sherry first. Okay, we'll hit the break. Be back with more in a moment.